Welcome back, everybody. Today, we're going to be taking a deep dive into digital research,
Ooh, fun.
you know? And you've brought some excerpts from a book called Understanding Research in the Digital Age.
Yes,
And I love this. It's all about how technology is changing the way that we do research.
exactly. And one of the things I find fascinating about this book is that it really highlights this dual nature of digital research.
Mm.
You know,
Hmm.
it's not just about studying the digital world.
Right.
It's also about using digital tools to study anything you can imagine.
Yeah, that's a really good point because it's like the digital world is both the subject of research, but it's also like this powerful set of tools for
Mm.
research.
Mm.
So the book talks about this framework of like digital as a phenomenon
Right.
and digital as a method. Can you unpack that a little bit more for us?
Sure. So when we talk about digital as a phenomenon,
Mhm.
we're looking at the digital world itself as a subject of inquiry.
Okay.
So things like, how do people form online identities?
Mhm.
How does information spread online? And how does misinformation spread online?
Right. The evolution of virtual communities.
Mm.
All of these things are phenomena that are unique to the digital age.
So it's almost like digital sociology or anthropology.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then you have digital as a method.
Okay.
And this is where you're using digital tools to study really anything.
Right.
So think about online surveys to understand consumer behavior.
Right.
You can analyze social media data to look at public opinion around certain political topics,
Oh, interesting.
or even virtual reality simulations for psychological experiment.
Wow.
So it's less about what you're studying and more about how you study it.
That is really interesting. I like that. And then that leads us to this really cool, I thought, 2x2 matrix from the book.
Yes.
Figure 1.1.
Hmm.
And it kind of maps out all these different ways that digital research can be approached,
Right.
depending on if your research question and the methods that you use are what's considered established or emerging.
Exactly.
It's a really great way to kind of visualize it. And the book gives a really nice example, too. They talk about studying online gamers.
Okay.
So that's a fairly new and emerging phenomenon.
Yeah.
But researchers might choose to use like face-to-face interviews as a way to get insights.
Okay.
So that's kind of an established research method
Yeah.
applied to an emerging digital phenomenon.
Makes total sense. You can kind of mix and match it depending on the research question.
Exactly.
So we've got kind of this dual nature of digital research and all these different ways to approach it. But here's where it gets even more interesting, I think,
Okay.
which is that the digital landscape itself is constantly changing. It's
Yes.
very much in flux. So
Yeah.
how does that impact how we do research?
Well, the book actually identifies 6 key environmental changes that are happening in the digital age that are forcing researchers to rethink the old assumptions and boundaries.
Okay.
One of the biggest ones is data.
Okay.
We are producing so much data every single day with every click, with every share.
Right.
And all of that is being recorded and stored
Okay.
at a scale that's never been seen before.
Yeah, that makes sense because I even think about it for myself. I mean, I can't even imagine how much data I'm generating on a daily basis.
It's mind-boggling.
Yeah, and so for researchers, I imagine that can be both like this gold mine of information, but also incredibly overwhelming.
It's both.
Yeah, and I imagine it also raises a lot of questions about data privacy
Absolutely.
and how researchers handle this wealth of information responsibly.
That is one of the big themes in the book, is
Yeah.
really emphasizing that researchers need to be very, very mindful about the ethical implications of working with this type of data.
It's like finding a needle in a haystack,
Right.
except the haystack keeps growing.
Exactly.
Eventually.
So, and changing.
And changing, yeah. And I love how the book kind of frames this challenge by talking about these 3 E's of digital research:
The 3 E's.
ethics, expectations, and expertise.
That's right.
So let's unpack those a little bit, starting with ethics.
Sure. So one of the things that the digital world does is that it really blurs the lines around privacy and consent.
Mm,
You know, what is considered public online.
right.
Can you use data from people who didn't explicitly agree to be part of a research study?
It's such a gray area now.
It is. And so the book is really emphasizing this idea of doing no harm,
Okay.
not only to your participants,
Mm,
but also being transparent about the limitations of the research that you're doing.
right, because you might have access to all this information,
Yes.
but that doesn't mean that you should use it all or that you can necessarily interpret it in a way that
Right.
is accurate or ethical.
Exactly. And then you have the second E,
Okay. Expectation.
expectations,
Yeah.
which is so interesting because you have these new technologies that are enabling these new forms of research, collaborative research, and what they call citizen science,
Okay.
where you're bringing in people who are not traditionally researchers to participate in the research process.
Hmm.
But that also raises all these questions about automation and control over the research process.
Yeah, because it's like democratizing research in a way.
It is.
But then it's like, okay, but who's setting the agenda?
Right. Who's deciding what gets studied?
Who owns the data? Yeah.
Yeah.
All those kinds of questions. And then the third E,
Expertise.
expertise. This is where I get a little nervous.
Yeah.
Because I'm like, okay, do I need to be like a coding whiz to do digital research?
Right.
Because I'm
Well, and that's one of the things I really appreciate about this book is that it's emphasizing the need for critical thinking as much as technical skills.
Okay.
Because you need to be able to ask the right questions. You need to choose the right method.
Right. Yeah.
You need to be able to analyze this large, complex data and really make sure that your findings are rigorous and relevant.
It's not just about knowing how to crunch the numbers.
Exactly.
Like, it's about knowing what questions to ask,
Right.
what data to look for, and how to interpret it in a way that is meaningful.
And to know the limitations of your data as well.
Yes, absolutely. Okay, so we've got those three E's. We've got the two sides of digital research.
Yeah.
But I think one of the things that I'm really curious about is like, okay, this is all very high level and conceptual,
Right.
but what are some of the practical challenges of actually working with digital data?
Yeah. I mean, one of the biggest challenges is just the sheer volume of data that is available.
Right.
It's coming from everywhere, from social media, from online transactions,
Sensor data from our phones.
from our smart devices.
Yeah.
So it's incredibly overwhelming even for the most seasoned researcher.
It's like trying to drink from a fire hose.
It really is.
So where do researchers even begin to make sense of all of that information?
Yeah. So one of the key strategies is to actually focus on the format of the data itself, because digital data comes in so many different forms.
Right. We're not just talking about numbers in a spreadsheet anymore.
No.
It's text, it's images, it's videos.
Geolocation data.
It's everything.
It's everything.
Yeah.
And so understanding the nuances of each of those formats is really crucial for being able to analyze it effectively.
So it's like becoming fluent in the language of data.
It really is.
Each format has its own grammar and syntax.
Yeah. And then on top of that, you have the fact that digital data is often very messy.
Okay.
It can be unstructured.
Yeah.
It can be incomplete. It can even be contradictory.
So it's not just as simple as downloading a perfectly formatted spreadsheet and plugging it into a program.
Nope.
And
Getting your results.
Yeah.
A lot of times researchers spend an enormous amount of time just cleaning and preparing the data.
Oh, interesting. So it's like being a digital detective almost.
It really is. You're piecing together clues from all these different fragments of information that are scattered across the internet.
Yeah.
And so being very skeptical, being meticulous, and being open to new perspectives is key.
And constantly adapting because the digital world is constantly evolving.
Exactly.
So that's another challenge I'm thinking about, which is time. The digital world moves at warp speed.
Yes.
How does that impact the way we approach research?
That's a fantastic question. And the book talks about this idea of the temporality of digital data.
Okay.
It's constantly being created, shared, modified in real time. And this presents both really unique challenges
Okay.
and incredible opportunities.
Okay. Tell me more about that.
So on the one hand, it can be really difficult to capture and analyze data when it's moving so fast.
Right. Because like think about Twitter,
Exactly.
like a trending topic.
Yeah.
By the time you collect the data, it's like the conversation has moved on.
That's already old news.
Right.
It's exactly.
So it's like studying a flock of birds in flight.
Constantly in motion,
Yeah.
elusive,
Yes.
ever-changing.
Okay. But you said there's opportunities here too.
But on the other hand, this rapid flow of data can give us incredible insights into human behavior in the moment. So we can actually track how people are reacting to events in real time.
Oh, interesting.
We can observe how opinions form and spread.
Wow.
We can see how social movements gain momentum.
It's like having a front row seat to the evolution of human interaction.
It really is.
In the digital age. That's incredible. But I imagine there are also challenges with that.
There are.
Because if things are changing that quickly, how do you even decide like what data is worth capturing?
That's one of the big questions that researchers are grappling with.
Yeah.
Is how do you make sure that you're not just chasing the latest trend,
Right.
but that you're actually capturing something that's meaningful, and that's going to have lasting value.
And I imagine there's also the challenge of, like, how do you even store and manage all of that data if it's constantly coming in?
Exactly. You need robust infrastructure.
Yeah.
You need powerful tools to
Yeah.
be able to handle that kind of volume and velocity of data.
Okay, so we've talked about the kind of real-time challenges of data, but there's also the historical dimension of digital data.
Right.
So it's not just about what's happening right now, but also about what's happened in the past.
And that's one of the things that's so fascinating about the digital world is that it leaves a trail. Everything that we do online, every email we send, every website we visit, every photo we post,
Right.
it's all archived somewhere.
It's all out there. Yeah.
And that historical data can be incredibly valuable
Okay.
for researchers who are trying to understand long-term trends and patterns.
So it's like having access to a digital time capsule almost.
It really is.
You can go back and see how people were talking about a particular issue 5 years ago, 10 years ago,
Yeah,
and see how that conversation has evolved.
exactly. And it allows us to study things in a way that was never possible before. We can track the evolution of language, the spread of ideas, the rise and fall of social movements.
All through this digital lens.
Exactly.
But I imagine there are challenges there, too,
There are.
when it comes to accessing and analyzing all of that historical data.
One of the biggest challenges is just finding the data that you need.
Right.
It's often scattered across different platforms and databases. And tracking it down can be a real challenge.
And then even once you find it, you have to make sure that it's accurate,
Exactly.
reliable. That's a lot of work.
It is. It's like being a historian,
Yeah.
an archivist, and
Yeah.
a detective,
Yeah, all rolled into one.
all rolled into one.
That's a great way to put it. Okay, so we've talked about the challenges of volume format and now time,
Yeah.
but let's get down to the nitty-gritty here.
Yeah.
How do researchers actually go about finding the right data for their research?
Right.
Where do they even start looking?
Well, the book emphasizes that it all starts with a clearly defined research question. You have to know what you're trying to answer
Okay.
before you can start identifying the data sources that are most likely to provide you insights.
So it's not just about finding data, it's about finding the data that's relevant
Exactly.
to your research question. But even then, with so much data out there, I imagine it's still overwhelming.
It is.
So how do researchers narrow it down and choose the best data sources for their study?
There are a few key things to consider.
Okay.
First is data quality. Is the data accurate?
Right.
Is it reliable? Is it representative of the population that you're interested in studying?
So data quality is paramount. What else?
Another consideration is accessibility.
Okay.
Can you actually get access to the data that you need?
Right.
Is it publicly available? Or do you need to request permission to use it?
Right. Because there's no point in chasing after data
Exactly.
if you can't actually get your hands on it.
And even if you can request it,
Yeah.
are you going to get approval?
Yeah. What are the chances? Okay.
Yeah.
What other factors come into play?
You also need to think about the ethical implications
Okay.
of using the data. Does it contain personal information? That needs to be protected. Are there any privacy concerns?
Right.
And how are you going to make sure that your research doesn't harm
Individual.
individuals or groups that
Right.
you're studying?
So it's a really complex equation.
It is.
With a lot of variables.
To consider.
Yeah. And it's not just about finding data. It's about finding the right data
Yes.
and using it responsibly.
And using it responsibly.
Okay. So we've talked about finding the data, choosing the right data.
Yeah.
Now, how do researchers actually collect and organize all this information?
Right. Because it's one thing to identify a source,
Right.
but it's another thing to actually gather all the information and put it into a format that you can analyze.
And I imagine this is where technology comes in with all these tools.
And the book has a lot of really interesting discussion about the interaction between humans and technology in this data collection process.
Right.
Because it's not just about using fancy software to scrape data from the web. It's about making strategic choices about what data to collect,
Okay.
how to collect it, and how to make sure that the data is high quality.
Right. So you can't just blindly rely on the technology. You have to think critically about it.
You have to use it ethically. The book emphasizes the importance of having a clear data collection plan,
Okay.
a roadmap for how you're going to approach this process.
What might that look like?
What are the goals?
Yeah.
What are your methods?
Yeah.
What are the ethical considerations?
Can you give us a glimpse behind the curtain?
Sure. So a typical data collection plan might start with identifying the specific platforms or
Oh,
databases
okay.
that you're going to use.
So like Twitter, Facebook, Reddit, or
Exactly.
some
Or a
combination.
combination of all the above.
Okay.
And then you'll need to decide on your collection methods.
Okay.
Are you going to use automated tools to scrape data from the web, or are you going to manually collect information?
Right.
Or maybe some combination of both.
And I imagine each approach has its own pros and cons.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Automated tools can be fantastic for gathering large amounts of data very quickly,
Right.
but they can miss important nuances, whereas manual collection can be more time-consuming.
Right.
But it allows you to have more control over what you're gathering.
So it's a trade-off between efficiency and precision.
It is.
Okay, and then once you've got all this data, you have to organize it
Yeah.
and store it,
And that can be very overwhelming.
I imagine.
So having a system in place for managing your data,
Okay.
whether it's using spreadsheets, databases, or specialized software, is essential.
Because what good is a mountain of data if you can't actually make sense of it?
Exactly. You need to be able to find what you need when you need it.
And then there's also the process of data cleaning.
Yes. This is a very important step.
Okay, what is that?
So data cleaning is basically the process of identifying and correcting any errors or inconsistencies in your data. So this might involve removing duplicate entries,
Right.
fixing typos,
Okay.
dealing with missing data points.
It's like spring cleaning for your data.
It is. You're getting rid of the clutter
Yeah.
and making sure that everything is in its rightful place.
Okay, and so why is data cleaning so important?
Well, because the quality of your data is going to directly impact the quality of your findings.
Right. Garbage in, garbage out.
Exactly.
Okay, so we've collected our data, we've organized it, we've cleaned it.
We're ready to go.
Are we ready to start analyzing?
Almost.
Yeah.
There's one more piece of the puzzle that we need to talk about.
Oh, okay, what's that?
The human element.
Wait, I thought we were talking about digital research.
Where do the humans fit in?
Yeah.
And that's a great question. And it gets to the heart of what makes digital research so unique, is that we have all of these amazing tools
Right.
for collecting and analyzing data.
Yeah.
But we can't forget that behind all of that data are real people
Right.
with real lives,
With real experiences.
with real experiences.
Yeah, it's easy to get lost in the numbers.
It is.
And forget that each data point represents a human being.
Exactly. And so the book really emphasizes this importance of ethical considerations throughout the entire research process.
So not just at the beginning when you're designing your study,
Yeah.
but also when you're collecting the data, when you're analyzing it.
All the way through to the dissemination of your findings. Yeah.
So it's not just about following the rules. It's
Yeah.
about being mindful.
It's about thinking critically
Yeah.
about the impact that your research might have on the people whose data you're using.
Recognizing the human stories behind the data.
Exactly.
Yeah, this is really eye-opening. I'm starting to see how digital research is not just about technical skills and data analysis. It's really about understanding the complexities of the human experience in the digital age.
It's about using technology to illuminate the human condition,
Wow.
to tell stories that matter.
I love that. Okay, well, this has been an incredible deep dive so far.
Yeah, it's a fact.
We've learned about the dual nature of digital research, the challenges and opportunities of working with data,
Ethical implications.
ethical implications, and we're just getting started.
What?
In the next part of our deep dive, we'll be exploring how digital research is changing the way that we design research studies
Looking forward to it.
and some of the really exciting new approaches that are emerging in this field.
Absolutely.
Okay, so stay tuned, everybody. We'll be right back after a short break.
Okay, so we've laid a really great foundation for understanding this broader landscape of digital research. But now I'm curious how this translates to the actual design of research studies. Are we still using those classic research methods, or are there completely new approaches emerging in this digital age?
Well, that's where things get really exciting.
Yeah.
The book dives into how this digital environment is both transforming traditional research methods and giving rise to entirely new approaches. It's a very dynamic landscape that's constantly pushing the boundaries of research design.
I'm all ears. Can you give us some concrete examples of how these classic methods are getting like a digital makeover?
Sure, let's start with surveys. You know, in the past, we were limited to paper questionnaires or phone interviews.
Right. But now we have online surveys that allow us to reach global audiences, collect data much faster, and even personalize the survey experience based on participants' responses.
So it's like surveys have gone turbocharged.
Exactly.
What about experiments?
Oh, experiments are fascinating now.
Yeah.
Because online platforms have opened up this whole new world for experimental research. We can now conduct experiments with thousands or even millions of participants.
Wow.
Imagine testing different versions of a website to see which one performs better, or using virtual reality to create immersive environments for studying human behavior.
It's like having a virtual laboratory at your fingertips.
Exactly.
That's incredible. What about ethnography? That's a method that's all about observing people in their natural environments.
Right.
How does that translate to the digital world?
Well, we have something called digital ethnography. And it's a rapidly growing field. And it really involves immersing yourself in these online communities and cultures. So researchers might spend months participating in online forums, analyzing social media interactions, or even creating virtual avatars to interact with people in these virtual worlds.
So it's like being a digital anthropologist studying the tribes of the internet.
Exactly. It's about understanding the rituals, the norms, the values of these online communities, just as a traditional anthropologist would study a remote culture.
This is fascinating. So we have these classic methods being adapted and transformed for the digital age.
Right.
But are there any completely new research approaches emerging that are unique to this digital environment?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
One of the most exciting developments is this rise of what's called computational social science.
Okay, computational social science.
Yeah.
That sounds pretty high-tech.
It is a little bit. It involves using large-scale data analysis and computational techniques to study social phenomena.
So it's like big data meets social science.
Exactly. And it's allowing researchers to tackle questions that were previously impossible to study.
Okay.
And they can explore things like the spread of misinformation online, the formation of online communities, the impact of social media on political discourse, or even like the factors that contribute to social movements going viral.
It's like having a bird's eye view of society, but through this digital lens.
Exactly.
Amazing.
Yeah.
It seems like this digital age is not just changing the tools that we use, but also like the very nature of research itself.
I think that's a really good point. It's challenging us to rethink our assumptions, develop new skills, and embrace these new ways of knowing. But it's also incredibly exciting because it's opening up these new frontiers of knowledge and understanding.
Okay, so we've explored how classic research methods are being adapted for the digital age and how new approaches like computational social science are emerging.
Right.
But let's shift gears a bit and talk about something that's been on my mind throughout this whole discussion.
What?
We've touched on the ethical implications of digital research a few times,
Yeah.
but I'd love to dive a bit deeper. What are some of the specific ethical challenges that researchers need to grapple with in this new landscape?
That's a crucial question.
Yeah.
The book emphasizes that ethical considerations should be woven into every single stage of the research process, from the initial design of the study to the collection, the analysis, and even the dissemination of the findings.
So it's not just about tacking on ethics at the end. It's about thinking about it.
From the very beginning.
From the very beginning.
Yeah.
Okay, can you give us some concrete examples of these ethical dilemmas that researchers might encounter in digital research?
Yeah, one of the biggest challenges is around privacy and consent. In the digital world, people often share information online without fully realizing how that data might be used by researchers or by anyone else for that matter.
Right. It's like we leave this digital trail everywhere we go.
We do. And so researchers need to be incredibly mindful of how they collect, use, and protect that personal information.
It's like a whole new layer of ethical complexity.
It is.
Are there other challenges that researchers need to be aware of?
Yeah, another challenge is the potential for harm. Even if researchers are very careful about protecting privacy, their findings could still have these unintended negative consequences for individuals or groups.
Can you give us an example of that?
Sure. Imagine a study that analyzes social media posts to try to identify patterns of hate speech.
Okay.
While the research itself might be valuable, the findings could inadvertently stigmatize certain groups or contribute to online harassment.
So it's like this double-edged sword in a way.
Yes.
Where you're trying to do good.
Right.
But there's also the potential for harm. So researchers need to think not just about the potential benefits of their work.
Yes.
But also about the potential risks.
The potential unintended consequences.
Unintended consequences.
Yeah.
It's a delicate balancing act.
Yes.
Are there any best practices or guidelines that researchers can follow to try to navigate these ethical challenges?
Yeah, the book highlights several key principles. One is transparency.
Okay.
Researchers should be open about their methods, their data sources, and even their own potential biases.
So transparency is crucial for building trust,
Exactly.
both with the research participants and with the wider public.
Absolutely. What other guidelines are there?
Well,
Another really important principle is accountability.
hmm.
Researchers need to be accountable for their actions and be prepared to address any concerns or criticisms that might arise.
It's like a form of ethical responsibility?
It is. What else?
Okay.
The book also stresses the importance of informed consent, making sure that participants understand the purpose of the study,
Right.
the risks involved, and how their data will be used.
Informed consent is so essential for respecting the autonomy of the participant.
Exactly. And then finally, researchers need to be really mindful of the potential for bias,
Okay.
both their own personal biases
Right.
and biases that might be embedded in the data itself.
Yeah, because bias can creep into research in all sorts of subtle ways.
Ex-
So it's important to be aware of it
Yes.
and take steps to mitigate it.
Throughout the process.
Wow, this has been incredibly insightful.
Yeah.
It's clear that ethical considerations are not just an afterthought in digital research, but rather like a fundamental part of the process.
Exactly. Ethics should be woven into the very fabric of digital research.
From beginning to end. Okay, well, this conversation has been incredibly illuminating. We've explored the challenges and opportunities of digital research, from the evolution of those classic methods to the emergence of these new approaches like computational social science.
Right.
And we've delved into these ethical complexities of this new landscape.
Yeah, it's a fascinating field that's rapidly evolving.
But there's one more piece of the puzzle that I'm really curious about.
Yeah.
How do researchers actually go about analyzing all that digital data they've collected?
Right.
We've talked about these challenges of volume and format and time, but I'm eager to understand the specific techniques and tools that researchers use to make sense of it all. Let's explore that in the final part of our deep dive.
I'm happy to delve into that. It's where the magic of digital research really comes to life.
Okay, so we've talked about finding the right data sources. We've talked about collecting it responsibly. We've even talked about cleaning it up. But now comes like the really exciting part. How do researchers actually analyze all this digital data? It's one thing to have mountains of information, but it's another thing entirely to extract those meaningful insights from it.
Yeah, that's where the analytical toolbox of digital research really comes into play. The book highlights a range of techniques and tools that researchers use to make sense of this complex digital landscape.
I'm eager to hear more. Can you give us a taste of what's in this analytical toolbox?
Sure, it's a really interesting mix of traditional and cutting-edge approaches. On the one hand, researchers still rely on those classic analytical methods like statistical analysis
Right.
and qualitative coding,
Okay.
but those methods are often adapted and enhanced for the digital environment.
Can you give us an example of how a traditional method might be adapted for digital research?
Sure. Take content analysis, for example.
Okay.
This method's been used for decades to analyze text-based materials like newspaper articles or historical documents.
Right.
But now researchers are using it to analyze vast amounts of digital text from sources like social media posts, blogs, online forums.
So it's like content analysis on steroids.
Exactly.
Okay.
And there are even specialized software programs that can help researchers automate some of the more tedious tasks,
Oh, wow.
like counting keywords or identifying themes.
That's impressive. It sounds like technology is really amplifying the power of these traditional methods.
Yeah, it really is.
What about those cutting-edge approaches you mentioned? What are some of the newer techniques that researchers are using?
Well, one area that's generating a lot of excitement is network analysis.
Okay.
And this technique allows researchers to visualize and analyze the relationships between people, organizations, or even ideas.
So how does that work in practice?
Well, imagine you're studying the spread of misinformation online.
Okay.
Using network analysis, you could actually map the connections between different social media accounts and see how that false information is flowing through those networks.
That's fascinating. It's like creating a map of the digital landscape and tracing the paths of information.
Exactly. And you can use network analysis to study a wide range of phenomena, from the formation of online communities to the dynamics of political polarization.
It's a really powerful tool for understanding how information and ideas spread through those digital networks.
It is.
What other cutting-edge techniques are researchers exploring?
Another area that's really rapidly evolving is machine learning.
Oh, okay.
And this involves using algorithms to analyze data, identify patterns, and make predictions.
Machine learning seems to be popping up everywhere these
It
days.
really is a hot topic.
How are researchers using it in the context of digital research?
Well, machine learning can be used for a variety of tasks, from sentiment analysis to image recognition. For example, you could use machine learning to analyze thousands of social media posts and identify patterns in how people are expressing their emotions online.
So it's like teaching machines to read human emotions.
In a way, yes.
Yeah.
And it's also being used to develop new tools for data visualization and analysis, making it easier for researchers to make sense of these very, very complex data sets.
This is incredible. It seems like the analytical possibilities are constantly expanding with digital research.
They really are. It's a very dynamic field that's constantly pushing the boundaries of what's possible.
This has been a truly fascinating deep dive. We've learned about the dual nature of digital research, the challenges and opportunities of working with digital data, the importance of those ethical considerations, and now this incredible range of analytical techniques available to researchers. I feel like I've gained a whole new appreciation for the complexities and the possibilities of this field.
Me too. It's been really fun to explore.
Before we wrap up, I want to take a moment to reflect on the bigger picture here. What does all of this mean for the future of research? How is digital research shaping the way that we create and understand knowledge?
I think digital research is fundamentally transforming the research landscape. It's breaking down those traditional barriers between disciplines, it's creating new opportunities for collaboration, and it's accelerating the pace of discovery.
It's like opening up a whole new universe of
It
possibilities.
really is.
Yeah.
And I think it's essential for researchers in all fields to really embrace the principles and the practices of digital research. It's no longer a niche area of study.
Hmm.
It's really a core competency for anyone who wants to understand and engage with the world around us.
So well said. This deep dive has been incredibly insightful and thought-provoking. I want to thank you for sharing your expertise and for helping us navigate this really complex and fascinating landscape.
It's been my pleasure.
To all our listeners out there, we encourage you to continue exploring the world of digital research. It's a journey of discovery, and we're all in this together. Until next time, keep those minds curious and those explorations going.